So dudes, it's your boy too, and today we're going to talk about Powercreep and Gacha games. The Hoyoverse Gachas, that is. Specifically, why most of you overblow the fuck out of it. So let me know if any of these sound familiar to you. Chiori Powercreep's Albedo, Arlecchino Powercreep's Hutao, Jinglu Powercreep's Blade, only to then get Powercrept by Daniel Alter right after, and now the most recent addition of MiHoYo Powercreep, the girls you saw in the thumbnail for this video, Clara and Yunli. First off, what is Powercreep? For those of you who haven't heard the term before or you're not sure what it means. Strictly speaking, it's when a game releases a new playable character or gear or some form of content that's stronger than what you had access to previously. Power creep is typically viewed as a bad thing for many reasons. It potentially reduces the viability of older characters or gear, or just content in general, because why would you use the older stuff when the newer stuff is just straight up better, which could invalidate all the time and effort you put into getting or investing into your older content in the first place. It may feel like, the developers are blatantly trying to make some easy money, right, by putting in new top tier content and getting their players to buy it, and by extension it can make a game feel much more pay to win than it needs to be, etc. This is why you hear all this yapping about power creep every so often in the Hoyoverse communities. Players don't like it when they, invest into a character only for the next one to come out who does a similar job to end up being stronger, and even worse if a character they like personally ends up being, power crept this way. That, and since these are gacha games we're talking about here, oh boy, it's time to have to roll for another character who does the same job as this older character but does it better than them, so we have to get this new character in order to keep up with the meta. Or people are just fucking dipshits and just want something to bitch about. You never know, it's the internet after all. So why do I say that all this, power creep talk is overblown? If the Hoyotards actually have a few good reasons to bring up power creep, why do I not take it seriously? The biggest problem when it comes to most gacha players talking about power creep is that the gachas they play, most of them anyway, do not have PvP. Power creep is the most tangible in games that have an established competitive aspect to them, because in PvP games, when they put out new content, right, that power creeps their older content, you are going to be directly affected. When Call of Duty puts out a DLC with a new gun that's better than all the default guns, and you have people running around outgunning you with it, right? When League of Legends releases a new champion that just rips your ass a new one every time you run into them in top lane, when Smash Ultimate puts in Steve from Minecraft and he ends up breaking the fucking game, shit like that. Again, when PvP games have power creep, at the end of the day, you are eventually going to be on the receiving end of it, and it will directly affect your progress and your enjoyment of those games. And hey, guess what the Hoyoverse games don't have? That's right, PvP. And let me tell you, as someone who plays a whole shit ton of gacha games, you really don't want PvP in a gacha, man. Because in a genre that's all about hero collection, right? Some people are simply gonna have more shit than others, and that already breaks the whole premise of a fair and balanced PvP. For the gacha games that do have it, it's usually a side game mode that, despite being PvP, isn't meant to be super competitive. Azure Lane, Blue Archive, and Nikke are the three gachas that I play that have explicit PvP game modes, but for Azure Lane and Blue Archive, they're mainly intended to provide you a specific type of currency that you can only get from those PvP modes to go buy extra stuff from the shops or something. Nikke does give you more gacha currency based on how well you perform on the ladder, sure, but generally speaking, it's still not worth tryharding PvP just for some more extra gems, since the characters that are meta for PvE and PvP are largely different, and you'd rather focus on your PvE units because they can clear a lot more content for you in this game than just PvP. That, and the PvP modes for all three games are auto battle only, so they just end up being bullshit RNG that you shouldn't take seriously anyway. I mean, hell, for power creep to truly be relevant in a gacha game, I'll even take competitive PvE, which is basically content where players can compete against each other indirectly by, like, fighting a boss or whatever, and see how well their scores compare with others, right? Think Girls Frontline ranking maps, or Blue Archive raids, or Nikke solo raids and guild raids, or Snowbreak's neural simulation and other ranked event game modes. But hey, the Hoyoverse games don't even have that. Quick side note here, if you want to see what a gacha game with an actual functioning, serious PvP mode looks like, look no further than Epic 7. Its PvP has matchmaking and seasonal ranks, and when you get into a match, you have global bans and a pick ban phase that makes you look like you're playing a MOBA to determine the teams you and your opponent will be using for that match. And would it surprise you to know that power creep is fucking rampant in that game? Another problem is that the content in Hoyoverse games is not what I would consider to be difficult enough to warrant worrying about power creep. Hell, they don't even have the endgame content that could potentially warrant power creep discussion in the first place. Genshin's gameplay boils down to abusing elemental reactions or like elemental counters and iframing everything that the enemies try doing, and if you suck at iframing, there's always Yunli. And Zenless Zone Zero is mainly a skill issue of can you press spacebar properly. Star Rail is like the one game that from a gameplay difficulty perspective, yeah sure, I can sorta see the power creep angle here, because the main endgame mode here, in this game, Memories of Chaos, or MOC for short, can be quite tough if you don't have like the right units or teams to tackle whatever's on rotation. But then you realize that MOC is balanced around whether or not you have the most recent 5-star characters, and if you do, well, congratulations, your job just got a whole lot fucking easier. Genshin does this too for Spiral Abyss, by the way. That, and Star Rail, mechanically speaking, is an extremely simple game. Like, all of its mechanics are easy to understand and very shallow to the point where I would actually consider Genshin to be more mechanically complicated. And most, if not all, Star Rail characters are very straightforward and easy to grasp once you figure out what their game plans are. And Star Rail's endgame is most easily beaten by the most recent characters, sure, but you can still clear them with older characters just fine too, so long as they fit the elemental requirements you need for the toughest stages and they play into whatever the stage gimmicks are. Right? You might not be able to beat MOC as fast as if you did have the newest characters, but as long as you get 36 stars and get all the rewards, who fucking cares if you beat a turn or two faster? 0 cycles? Never heard of them. Try TAing some FGO challenge quests instead. In sharp contrast, gacha games like FGO, GFL, Arknights, and others have gameplay that's actually worthy of having discussions about power creep, even if they're only single-player games with no PvP modes. Hell, even a game like Blue Archive, which is one of the most casual-friendly gacha games out there, can have legit power creep discussions because of how fucking bullshit the raids in that game are. And lastly, the power creep in question has to be drastic, as in like a significant change to the overall meta of a game. And when I say meta here, I don't just mean, oh, who are the strongest characters, bro, because that's how most people use that term. In this context, when I say meta, I'm talking about what the optimal ways of playing the game are, which includes not just the strongest characters in the game, but also the preferred ways of playing said game, or like the ideal strategies of the moment to beat the harder content of those games. To take Genshin as an example here, the meta in Genshin Impact right now is national variants and aggravate, spread, or aggravate teams. The two biggest shifts in Genshin's meta, in my opinion, were when Raiden was put into the game, and when Dendro, and by extension Nahida, were also put into the game. But in the grand scheme of things, these meta shifts didn't feel that impactful to me, since Genshin doesn't have the kind of endgame where these meta shifts would actually be relevant. Right, sure, back when Raiden came out, for example, I'm sure she helped a lot of players finally achieve 36 stars in Abyss for the first time, and that's not nothing, but as long as Spiral Abyss continues to be the only real source of endgame in Genshin, and the dev team continues to hide behind their excuse of anxiety, right, I'm not particularly interested in the meta of this game. I mean, honestly, you'll probably find more impactful meta changes in the Genshin TCG, because that game actually has PvP. Hell, MiHoYo actually bothers hosting official tournaments for it, so you know it's gotta have some wicked meta to it that TCGs usually have. The level of impact on a gacha's meta that I'm looking for personally is something like these. The big support servants in FGO like Scotty, Castoria, KOL, and Oberon, P22 and the Coalition squads in GFL, Walter and Arknights, and Summer Hoshino in Blue Archive. Not only are these units some of the best in their respective games, but the games that they're all in also have the endgame content that allows their impact to be that substantial in the first place. But let's take a step back for a moment from all this gameplay shit and focus back on what's truly important in gacha games, the waifus and husbandos. I shit you not, because in my opinion, the reason why you should be playing these sorts of games in the first place is for the characters, right? Because in gacha games, you roll for the characters. Like, they're the reason why you grind gems every day, right? And save them up to eventually roll for a character that you want who's got fat tits and or a huge ass. And by extension, I think that the best way to play gacha games is by finding a character that you really like and doing what you can to obtain them, ideally for free, or at least with not too much money. Basically, fuck the meta, acquire waifu or husbando, and go apeshit. Even better if your waifu or husbando is the meta, in which case, aren't you lucky? But even if they're not, right, you should at least try to look for ways to play them and build teams around them in order to make them work. Luckily for the Hoyoverse games, you can do this easily. Even in Star Rail, where elemental weakness is a mechanic that you have to take advantage of in order to clear harder content, because hey, Silverwolf exists. Or, if you don't want her, you can just main Firefly or Boot Hill and put fire or physical weakness on anyone because fuck you. And this is the biggest reason why I do not care for power creep talk, at least not in Hoyoverse games, because theoretically in Genshin, Star Rail, and Z3, you can make any character work, even the infamously weaker ones, like Amber in Genshin or Arlen in Star Rail, because in the Hoyoverse games, you have something that most other gacha games simply don't, a gear system with RNG substats. As horrible as the RNG is in Hoyo's gear systems, be it artifacts or relics or disk drives, the silver lining they have is that they have the potential to make a character quite a bit stronger than what was probably intended for them. Because in most other gacha games, once you max level a character and whatever gear they have, that's it. Usually you can't do anything to make them any stronger than that. But here in the Hoyoverse, technically speaking, there's always a way to make your character stronger. You do need to get lucky, though, and that's obviously very difficult, but the possibility is always there at least. And once you work on a character for long enough and they finally get the stats that you're looking for on them, they should get the job done. Any character can get the job done. And if you truly main a character, right, you're gonna do what it takes to make them viable no matter the cost. And again, like I said earlier, it doesn't matter if they're not as strong as the top tiers, right? Hoyoverse games not named Honkai Impact 3rd don't have leaderboards, they don't have PvP, hell, they don't even have any official competitive PvE mode like the ones we mentioned earlier. Unless you want to count Wind Trace, but I sure as hell don't. Their endgame modes don't have any condition that says, oh, you get more rewards for clearing endgame stuff faster or anything like that. It's just as long as you beat Abyss floors in under 3 minutes, as long as you clear MOC in under 10 turns, and don't lose any characters in the process, that's it, that's good enough, you get all the rewards. Not to mention, the older characters in Hoyoverse games are still perfectly capable of holding their own, even to this day. Right, you still have characters like Xiangling, Xingqiu, and Bennett in Genshin who make up the core of national teams. You still have Asta and Tingyun in Star Rail who are both extremely strong and capable supports, and Daniel Alter is still as busted as ever, especially now that Hanabi exists. It's not like MiHoYo goes back to specifically nerf older characters just to make the newer ones look better. I mean, last I checked, their name doesn't sound like Nexon. 2 from the future here, I want to add one more thing that I forgot about when I initially made this video, and that's redundancy. Even if a gacha game puts out a new character who seems like they power creep an older unit, remember that a lot of gacha endgames, right, let you bring in 2 teams, or they require you to bring in 2 teams, that is, or more to clear all the floors. And unlike old school gacha games where sometimes they let you bring in multiple copies of the same unit, new school gachas, as I like to call them, for the most part don't let you do that. So no matter how strong a character is, you can't use them in both sides of like Spiral Abyss, for example. You have to pick one. This is why, for example, Yelan in Genshin Impact is so strong, because she's basically a 5-star Xingqiu, and we already know how strong Xingqiu himself is. This means that you can run both sides with a team that has a strong Hydro off-field character that enables any Hydro-related reaction you want. And yes, strictly speaking, this is also another example of power creep. It's just that at this point, no one gives a fuck, because it turns out having 2 Xingqius in Abyss is really fucking nice for a lot of players. Or, if you're really crazy, having both Yelan and Xingqiu on the same team is absolutely hilarious. And if some of you disagree in the sense that, oh, Xingqiu is only a 4-star and Yelan's a 5-star, and so it's not fair to compare the two of them because of their rarity difference, then allow me to present to you the curious case of Gallagher and Lingsha in Honkai Star Rail. Both of them are Fire Abundance characters, with Gallagher being 4-star and Lingsha being a 5-star. They are both fire healers who scale off Break Effect, with Gallagher showing up first with the Panakini update back in 2.0 or whenever, and Lingsha later during 2.5 or 2.6. I forget which patch we're on right now, to be honest. But I explicitly remember seeing people doom post about how, oh, Gallagher is getting power crept so fast when Lingsha was announced because it looked like Lingsha does everything Gallagher does, but better. But here's the thing, right? Consider this. Now that we have Rappa, and it looks like she's more or less, an alternate Firefly who does imaginary damage instead of fire, and we already have the leaks for Fugui, or as I like to call her, Proto Tingyun. Without spoiling too much, it seems like she's got Super Break abilities. That's already half of a second Super Break team right there. And hey, you remember that one 4-star Break Effect healer who everyone said got power crept by Lingsha? Yeah, that Gallagher dude. Yeah, remember him? Yeah, he's still in the game, by the way. It's not like MiHoYo fucking deleted his ass off the game just cause Lingsha's better than him. Wait a minute. All we need is a 4th Break Effect or even Super Break character, either another support or maybe even a sub DPS, and there you go. A second Super Break team that you can now run alongside the original Firefly team. Or more realistically, for most players, you can mix and match those characters, whichever ones you do have, to put together your own Super Break team. Because obviously not everyone's gonna have all the characters. And this leads me, finally, to addressing the two girls who are the most topical right now when it comes to the whole power creep discussion, Clara and Yunli. Both of them are physical destruction characters who also have the exact same playstyle of being counterattackers. Yunli is considered to be a stronger Clara, not exactly surprising considering Clara is a permanent 5-star character, while Yunli is limited, but people look at this and go, oh my god guys, look, this is power creep, hey look guys, Yunli power creeps Clara. Clara's dead as a character now, right? There's no point in using her anymore. Time to ditch her ass in the same trash can where we also tossed Physical and Fire Trailblazer ever since we got HMC. Well, consider this. If you already have Clara, who's got good gear and is pretty heavily invested, and if you didn't already pre-farm for Yunli, how long do you think it's gonna take for your free-to-play ass to fully build Yunli, right? Get her all the relics that she wants, get her all the trace materials that she needs to max out everything, right? Max out a trace tree or whatever, right? Because until you can do that, until you can fully invest into Yunli, you're not gonna use her level 1 ass when Clara does the same thing and she's already good to go. And let's say you did pre-farm for Yunli, right? And so she's ready to put your Clara 6 feet under. Well, hold up a second here. Yunli's primary source of damage comes from her parry, which involves you activating her ultimate just before an enemy attack, so that way you get Yunli's special counterattack that does the most damage. The problem with this ult is that you have to, God forbid, pay attention to the turn order and see exactly when you should use it. And playing on double speed like most players do, it's easy to lose track of the turn order and forget to pop Yunli's ult in time before an enemy goes. Not only that, but you also have to know that enemies are about to use an attack. Lots of enemies, especially bosses, have moves that don't attack at all, and instead just buff themselves or summon mobs or some shit like that, which means that you have to not only know the movesets of the enemies that you're facing, but also keep track of which moves they're about to use. This means that Yunli is basically a big fat knowledge check on how well you know the enemies that you're up against, which is honestly rather unusual for a game like Star Rail. In other words, Yunli requires much more brain power to play optimally. Meanwhile, Clara, on the other hand, is the exact opposite in terms of mental stack because she is such a brain-dead character, which in this context is actually a good thing. Because all you have to do with Clara is stick her in a team, right? Wait for enemies to eventually hit her, and watch as Savarog fucking shoots them in the face. And every now and then, you pop her ultimate and watch Savarog shoot bitches in the face even harder. Oh, and speaking of Savarog, Clara's got a cool-ass Giga Chad of a robot who fights for her. What does Yunli have? A femboy boyfriend who's considered bottom tier by most Star Rail players? So, does Yunli power creep Clara? Sure, if you have what it takes to play her optimally, that is. Hell, she might still outdamage Clara even if you mess up all of her parries. But do I care, though? Let's see. Star Rail has no PvP, it's got some endgame, but in places where Yunli works, Clara should also work too, as long as she's geared well enough and she's got a good team to go with her, and Star Rail's gameplay itself is simple to the point where it's almost an insult. So no, I don't particularly care that Yunli power creeps Clara, and I think you shouldn't either. If you want Yunli, whatever your reason might be, either because you're a degenerate foot lover, or because she's a stronger Clara, then yeah, sure, go ahead, roll for her. But should you waste your time bitching on Twitter about how your Clara is now basically a dead character now that Yunli's in the game? Probably not. If you want to bitch about power creep that badly, go play a gacha with a meta that's actually worthy of being called a meta, and you're gonna find out real fucking soon why the only gacha games you play are Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and or Zenless Zone Zero. Alright, thanks for listening to my TED Talk on why power creep in Hoyoverse games is pretty pointless most of the time. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I also dual stream to both YouTube and Twitch, twitch.tv/ToaSniper98. So stop by if you want to hang out, or if you think I'm wrong about all this power creep stuff and you want to prove me otherwise. I don't mind. I love talking about gacha games after all, in case that wasn't obvious enough by now. Check out the Patreon too if you want to see your name show up at the end of these videos, and until next time, be cool y'all, and see you in the next one.